Welcome to the second installment of our Faxination 2016 video education series. In this video, we're going to install Faxination using the Advanced Mode option. This will ultimately create the same baseline installation that we had at the end of our previous video, but as the name suggests, the Advanced Mode gives us complete control over all of the installation options and connector components. Last time we used an on-screen timer to demonstrate just how quickly a functional copy of Faxination can be installed into your environment, less than 6 minutes on fairly modest hardware. For this advanced mode installation, we'll forego the timer and discuss the options in a bit more detail. The Faxination software is very modular. It's a simple process to add and remove components as required without reinstalling the product. So in these introductory videos, we're limiting ourselves to a baseline installation. Future videos in this series will build on this configuration, so we'll be using this as our starting point. In preparation, we've already installed the Faxination 2016 prerequisites. The supported operating systems are Windows Server 2016, 2012, 2012 R2, 2008, and 2008 R2. Note that the original Windows Server 2008 was available in both 32-bit and 64-bit versions. Faxination 2016 is a 64-bit application and requires a 64-bit operating system. We'll be extending our Active Directory schema. This gives us a place within Active Directory to store the per-user options and permissions for our on-premise Exchange integration. The Active Directory schema extensions can also be used with Office 365 and the Faxination SMTP interface. In large environments with multiple domains, we recommend that the schema be extended 24 hours in advance of the Faxination software installation to allow time for replication between all of the domain controllers and global catalog servers. Today we're working with a small demo environment, so we'll be extending the schema as part of the installation. We've created a service account for Faxination. We need the domain admin's role or the equivalent aggregate permissions for Active Directory integration. We'll need minimum Exchange admin permissions to create the gateway during install. We'll be using an existing SQL resource in the environment, so we have sufficient permissions to create and manage a database on that SQL server. If an existing SQL resource is not available, we also have the option to install SQL Express 2014 SP1 on the local machine, and those files are included as part of the Faxination 2016 distribution. If you wish to use GhostScript for PDF conversion, you can go ahead and download the latest version and install it. There are multiple engines for converting PDF documents, but most of our customers use GhostScript. The software is free, the conversion is fast, and the output from GhostScript seems to be the most accurate and consistent. Some document conversion methods require the Windows Desktop Experience feature to be installed. You can find that in the Windows Server Manager under Features and User Interfaces and Infrastructure. And finally, very important, we're going to log into the server using the Faxination service account before we run setup. A quick look at our Contoso demo environment. DC01 was our first domain controller and created the Active Directory for us. Exchange 01 is an on-premise installation of Exchange Server 2013. SQL 01 is a high availability SQL cluster in the environment. In this case, it's SQL Server 2012, but just about any modern version of SQL can be used. We'll be installing our software on Faxination 01. And our telephony system supports T.38 fax over IP, so we'll be pointing our fax over IP connector to the IP address of the PBX. This could also be a digital media gateway or a SIP trunk. Okay, so we're logged into Faxination 01 using the Faxination service account. This one, in this case, it's called Faxination SA. I'm going to open the installation files and run setup. And the first thing we're going to do is extend the Active Directory schema. Choose Next. We can have some options here. We're just going to do the full schema extension. You can always do that. Multiple opportunities to change your mind. Are you sure? Yes. And it's practically instantaneous. Most of what you saw was testing to see if the schema extensions worked okay. So our schema is extended, and we're going to run setup again, and this time we're going to choose the actual Faxination installer. Checking a few prerequisites. Now it says we don't see SQL on the local machine. Do you want to install SQL Express? We're going to say no, because we have a SQL server already in the environment. And the installation continues. Now we have the end user license agreement. Just choose save. It's going to save to the default Faxination installation path. Just click OK, accept the license agreement. And now we come to the choice of typical or advanced. In our previous video we did the typical mode, which sort of limits the options. This time we're going to do the advanced mode. We are going to turn off activate product during installation, and we're going to accept the default installation path. If you are adding a remote device or a remote host to an existing Faxination server, you would choose the standalone components option, but in this case we're going to install a local kernel. So this is the base configuration of Faxination. You always have to have a kernel available somewhere before you can run standalone components. First we have the server components. The tools is what's going to install the Fenestre Server Administrator. You really always need that because that's your primary configuration interface. In this case, we're not going to check anything else. We're just going to leave the tools as the default and move forward. Now we come to the host connectors. The print connector and the exchange connector are checked by default. But you see the difference between advanced and typical is that we have quite a few more options here as far as the different host connectors that we can select. But in this case, we want to achieve the same baseline configuration that we had previously, so we're just going to accept the defaults. Also with the device components, you can see there are a lot more options than there were in the typical mode. We're just going to go with the default of the Faxination Fax over IP device. Again, we want to create ultimately the same installation that we had in our previous video, and all of the other videos will build on that initial configuration. Now we need to provide the credentials for the service account. These credentials will be used to run all of the Faxination services. Setup will install the tools in the shared ActiveX components in the following folder. Just click Next. This is where you would select network load balancing support. This is different from the typical mode. If you're going to be building a load balanced environment with either software load balanced or using a hardware load balancer, this is where you would do that. When you enable it, it asks if this is going to be the central storage server and the Faxination server and all that. In this case, this is a standalone server, just a single kernel with currently all local hosts and devices. So move forward. Now it's asking us about our SQL resource, which we have in the environment. It's just SQL 01, and we have permissions on that server, so we're just going to use Windows authentication. What would you like to call the database on the SQL server? Fin messaging is the default. We're just going to leave that. Enter the IP address of the Fax over IP gateway, so it wants to know IP address of our digital media gateway, our SIP trunk, or our PBX. So in this case, it's our PBX. All right. It has detected Exchange 01 in the environment. What do we want to call the gateway? This is the foreign connector that we use to exchange information with Exchange. FCS gateway is the default name. Now we get a summary of everything that the installer is going to do. Notice that it has generated an evaluation key That's a 30-day evaluation key. So you can fully evaluate the server for 30 days. And the actual installation begins. So as you see, versus typical mode, the advanced mode just gives you several more options. Definitely you need to use advanced for remote devices and remote hosts. Remote fax devices are the most common because that gives you least cost routing by putting a remote device in another geographical region, so you won't have to pay long distance charges or international charges. Obviously, with the load balanced environment, you're going to install the first kernel, and then when you go to install the second kernel, it'll ask you where the first kernel is and so forth. We'll do a whole video on that later on, but that does require the advanced mode installation. As we said before, this is not a supercomputer by any means. This is a first generation Intel Core i7 processor. It's just VMware running on my workstation, so nothing fancy. In the previous video, it took about between 5.5 and 6 minutes to install the software, and that included going through all the dialogues and everything. So we typically block a 4-hour installation period if we're doing a remote install for a customer, but that includes all the testing and refining and everything. Creating the foreign connector in Exchange. Okay, so now we get to configure all the host and device connectors that we chose. So on the Exchange tab, you can see that we have a drop folder and a replay folder. Those have been picked up automatically. We're just going to accept the defaults. Nothing really to configure there in most cases. This is the print connector. Let's click OK. Our fax over IP device. Connectivity, services in and out. You can see for outbound, this is where our gateway is. We will do some configuration on this in a future video. Actually, the next video is a post-installation. Right, now we can configure all of the Faxination server settings, things like your backup files, setting the international prefix, fax options, redialing, and so forth. Again, we're going to do that in the next video under post-install. Alright, I'm going to turn off the README and go ahead and start the Fenestrate Server Administrator and let the services all start. The Faxination config service, we'll see some of that in our next video when we create their number substitution tables. This service provides a browser based interface to Faxination. Most of your day-to-day configuration can be done from your browser, from any browser in the environment. Alright, so we have all of our services running. We're going to send a test message, but the first thing I want to do is create some traces so we can actually see things happening as messages move through the system. So I'm enabling the trace on the Faxination server, the trace on the Exchange connector, and the Exchange on the fax over, or the trace on the fax over IP device. Start. Alright, so let's do those vertically. It gives us some information. Okay. We will click this button to start all the traces and have them concurrent so the timestamps all match. going to create a new email. We're using the address space format, so bracket fax colon 1 2 3 4 and the close square bracket. The subject is hello world. Keep doing that. Alright, just something simple. We'll click send, and then we'll immediately. Alright, so the Exchange connector gets it, it passes it to the kernel to make sure I have permissions. We'll maximize the fax over IP trace. Alright, so report went back, and we have a notification. Deliver report. Your message with subject hello world was successfully transmitted, completed without errors. Items sent 1, that's the number of pages. Number of attempts was 1, transmitted in 21 seconds at 14.4. Alright. And so that's the installation of Faxination 2016 in advanced mode. Faxination 2016 is available now. For more information or to request a free demo, visit us on the web at faxination.com and keep a lookout here for more updates in this Faxination 2016 video education series. Thanks for watching.